Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I am going to paint a red rose. I got a special request from someone very special to paint a rose, so I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. So I started out and I drew a sketch for myself. Doing a rose is not something that I've done recently, so I definitely wanted to draw a sketch out for myself. So for my background, because I really want my rose to stand out, I don't want a background that's going to compete with the red of the rose. So the idea that I had in mind is that I was going to have kind of like a pale pinkish color behind the rose that fades into a really light gray. So what I'm doing first is I'm starting with that background and starting with a pale pink, and that's just a mix of titanium white and permanent red. And I am using a 1/4 inch bright, maybe a 1/2 inch, just to go ahead and get that color down. And I'm not trying to make my background perfectly smooth or have really long paint strokes or brush strokes in there. So what I'm doing is kind of just scrubbing the color in and just wiggling my brush around, so that way if you look at it closely, it has really soft edges and it's just sort of a nice mixed background, not too smooth but somewhat interesting. So I kind of like that. I try to get myself to not use my brush just in long strokes or the way I kind of want to when I'm holding my brush. So I'm trying to use it in different ways, and so that's what I'm trying to do here. So because the pink is a little bit brighter than I want, even though it's still a pale pink, I really want to get that even paler. So I am adding more titanium white, just kind of mix mashing it in there, scrubbing it in places, and getting that color down. And I did speed up this painting. As I've mentioned in earlier videos, I tend to be a somewhat slow painter. Painting is something that I do for fun and to be relaxing after a big day at work. So this is what I do to kind of unwind and relax myself. So I take my time and I don't generally try to rush. But I do know that it takes a lot of patience to watch something in real time. But my mom did ask me to show a video in real time, so at some point I will do that. Traditional painting, not something abstract or an acrylic pour, but traditional painting I'll be sure to do in real time sometime for you, Mom. All right, and it looks like right now I am just going in and blending out those edges. Again, not with a perfect blend, but just mixing in that titanium white. And now I've grabbed some Mars Black with titanium white, like a lot of titanium white and just a dot of that Mars Black. So that way I have a really nice subdued kind of pale gray. And typically I don't like to make my grays out of just white and black. I'm kind of a fan of the Payne's gray that has a blue tint more to it. But for the purpose of this painting, I was okay with just going ahead with the white and the black together and then mixing them. So I'm starting with the outer edges first, getting that gray down, and then what I'll do once my gray is on the canvas, then go ahead again with more titanium white, and then go ahead and put those on the places where you see that transition from pink to gray, so that way it's not quite such a harsh line or a very direct transition from pink to gray. And I'm using the same brush. I didn't clean it. only because my colors are still so pale, and it's okay. I don't want to have that kind of like perfect blend, so it's okay if a little bit of the gray gets in to where the pale pink is. I'm okay if the pink gets into a little bit of where the gray is. And as I mentioned before, now I'm going in with more just almost straight titanium white to blend those transitions from the gray to the pink. And I did want to let you know I am using a canvas board. It's like a panel, flat. It's really nice. I like painting on these and then putting them on a shelf. They look really nice that way. Yeah, just right where those bright pink edges are, I want to make that a little bit more pale. Soften it up. And so now what was kind of a brighter pale pink is now paler. Again, I'm finding those areas that have those brighter spots or those harsher transitions and just trying to mix those up even better so that the transition just isn't quite so obvious and it just kind of fades from pink to white to gray. Just getting into those edges. And I'm okay if I go into my sketch because I will cover it with my color. And so now I'm going in with a crimson red and a little bit, with just a dot of ultramarine blue to give that red an even deeper color. But again, not wanting to go with the Mars black that's going to kind of overtake the red, but the blue will help deepen that red, but still give him more like a purpley tinge while still keeping the color of a deep, deep, deep red. And so now that I have that, I have grabbed a 1/4 inch angled brush, and in my sketch, I am now putting where my shadows would be. And I picked an angled brush because I wanted to be able to kind of twist my wrist easily with the brush in hand. And I find that an angled brush allows me to do that well while still carrying my paint and then being able to drag that brush and fill in all those nooks and crannies of the canvas, which is great. And so that's working for me well. And I have a lot of water on my brush because I want that paint to flow smoothly, and I'm going to be adding some other colors, and I want the paint to still be wet so that way I can blend it and it won't be just a harsh line out there. And it's a little hard to see the sketch, but I'm going everywhere that there was a space, and that's where my shadow was. And now I'm just going wherever that line was and then outward, because again, those are going to be my shadow pieces. So the pieces of the petal that are inside the flower are going to be the darkest, and then it's going to be brighter for the pieces that are coming out of the flower. So again, my brush is very wet. I'm still working with that angled brush, and I'm just moving that color out. And then I just grabbed more of that permanent red, but now without the mix of the ultramarine blue. So now it's just more of the red, slightly brighter, and you can see that slight, subtle difference between the two colors. And then that's my next layer. It's like my mid-tone for the flower. And again, keeping my brush very wet because I want those colors to blend together. And then I grabbed permanent red, which is my brightest red. I'm sorry, it's a little bit cut off, but that was on my palette paper from earlier when I made my pink. And so that's going to be my color that's going to go all the way to the outside edge of my petals. So those are going to be the brightest pieces of red on each petal towards the outside. And so acrylics are really great because it allows you to blend well as long as the paint is still wet. Acrylics are great, water soluble, as long as they're still wet. And then once they're dry, they're done. And that's what makes it awesome for layering, which I really love. And so like with acrylics, I tend to go with my darkest colors first and then build on top of it with my light colors, because you can go ahead and layer. You just, of course, want to pay attention to which colors tend to be transparent. And this permanent red does have a little bit of transparency to it. So even if I go over top the shadows that I've already put down, it will still show those shadow layers under it for my first go-overs of those layers, if that makes sense. Of course, the more and more layers that you put on it after it dries, it will eventually overtake it. But we're still within the first couple of layers, so this is showing through really nicely. And so now I'm just taking that permanent red and blending it in just a little bit more, kind of brightening up the edges, smoothing out the little areas that I may have missed on the first pass. I know my bottom petal is kind of wonky, but I kind of like it. Roses aren't exactly perfect with perfect petals everywhere, so I kind of wanted to keep it. So I didn't correct the little wonky flower petal. Yep, I'm still working with my angled brush here. And sometimes if you accidentally go a little bit too far, you can just adjust, like, oh, I guess I'll make my petal a little bit out here, or oh, here's a nice little piece that's sticking out. So I kind of did that and snuck that in there outside of the sketch. So now I am putting down some color to go ahead and color in my stem and my leaf that I have on the rose. Oh, nope, just kidding. I wanted to build my shadow a little bit more. Got ahead of myself. And so just the areas that look like a little more shadow or a little bit more blending could do, went ahead and did that. And sometimes you get to a point in a painting where you go, is that good? Do I fix it? Do I add a little bit more? Does it look good? And so I'm doing that throughout the whole painting once I get my red down in all of those areas. And just fine tuning. And now I'm laying down my green for the stem and the petal. And so I have a permanent green, a small dollop of ultramarine blue just to deepen the green a little bit. So I mixed a little bit of the darker green, then have it's called mid green by itself. And so here I've just grabbed a 1/4 inch flat brush, making that stem, and then my one flower leaf, and then I don't know what you call those little things that stick out that are holding the bud, and then once the flower blooms they kind of separate. I know someone knows. If you remember what those are called from your school days, please feel free to leave a comment and remind me. And so now I've taken that darker green onto the right side of the stem just to darken it a little bit and add a little bit more shadow to my petal. Not my petal, but my leaf. And the little sticking out pieces that I can't remember what they're called. And now that my flower, the petals are for the most part dry, I debated on whether or not I wanted to add just a little bit of highlight to the tip of the petals. And so I went ahead and went for it. So I'm just adding to the very, very edges of the petals, more so on the top, as if my light source is coming from the top leftish area. And so for those petals that are on that top left where the edge is facing the top left, I wanted to add some highlight to any of those petal edges that would be exposed to a light source there, just to add some highlight there. I wouldn't say I have instant regret, but I think that I would have been okay maybe without it, but I don't hate it, so I still like it. Hopefully it gives it a little bit more depth. So just added it lightly to the bottoms, but not quite as bright as for those petals that are, again, in that top left area. And it's just titanium white mixed with that permanent red. And I have another 1/4 inch flat brush that I'm using here, and I'm basically putting the color on by swiping my brush back and forth so that the tip is nice and really flat, and then just touching the tip to the edge of those petals. Because I'm not wanting that paint to go inward at all. It's just highlighting the very, very tips. And so that's why I'm adding paint often and keeping that brush tip nice and super flat. And that is it. That is my red rose. And thank you for watching. Hope you have a great rest of your day or evening. Please be sure to like and subscribe. Thank you.